So, hello. This weekend puts me in a place where I'm caught between working on one very big character analysis video and one in-depth scene analysis for a certain upcoming project. And since neither are finished, I thought I'd turn my thoughts to something a little more, hopefully concise. Or at least something where I don't need to assemble loads of clips from films and TV shows to edit together something flashy. Basically, I watched a video this morning by Galadriel called The Desecration of Femininity from her channel The Authentic Observer. And it was a very good video. There's no point me going through the whole video, it's an hour long. I don't have that kind of free time right now, and you'd be better just watching that actual video. But I think there is something from it I felt like talking more about in my own wondering aloud kind of way. I guess it requires me to start by saying an interesting point from a video is the idea that femininity has often come to be looked on as a bad thing. I think we're kind of all aware of this approach, particularly in films and TV. The media gives us strong female role models who can wield swords and beat people up and aren't at all vulnerable, which, yes, can obviously be a very positive thing. Women are that very stereotypical image of baking and cleaning and saying only nice, pretty things to people, as though the darker sides of the world are some inherently male sphere that women apparently lack the awareness to comprehend. I don't think it's at all groundbreaking for me to say that's not the case. And I think there are plenty of good examples in media of women who are physically strong and ferocious and very good characters. Even if there is an increasing trend of Hollywood to just stick a female character in armour with a sword and think that on its own makes her powerful and inspiring. I've never understood, just in general, what's supposed to be inspiring about someone being brilliant at things without having to encounter any of the emotional struggles you might actually relate to. Also, by the way, I've got some house rabbits in the room with me, so apologies if you hear any digging or chewing hay or cardboard in the process of this video. So yeah, there'll be something like that, or they'll give a woman some scene where she beats up an arrogant man who belittles her in a bar. Therefore, she's a brilliant character and the film is automatically wonderfully progressive. So whilst there are good examples, I think we get not just too much of the simplified bad ones, but also too many examples of this one specific character. I think the knock-on problem with that is that it increasingly becomes an expectation for women to be physically strong and tough, and that somehow if a woman isn't, they can't be an inspiring female role model. Like, these are the only type of inspiring female figures, which is an odd position for the world to be in. That was a key argument from her video. Women don't have to be what you typically call feminine, obviously not, but there's nothing wrong with being feminine. It shouldn't be looked on a weakness. There are many positive, wonderful traits to femininity that are increasingly squashed as something bad in place of women, I suppose, having to be more like the traditional image of a man. What are said wonderful traits of femininity? Well, she discusses them quite eloquently in her video. I did try to touch on it while recording now, but it became a bit too incoherent and haphazard, so I'll edit it out. And also, I suppose, because I wanted to hone in on that smaller point specifically, which is the strange irony that a feminist movement originally meant to be about freedom for women to live as they feel best, somehow derailing into the message that women should live in this very specific way, they should be strong, they should not be the traditional image of femininity, they should all be very masculine, for want of a better word. When I say strong there also, I am thinking that more surface level interpretation of strength there, like physical strength and toughness, because I'm not saying femininity isn't strong, it 100% is. I've grown up with some very good examples of that around me. That's the point of this really, there can be tremendous strength within femininity. It's a more internal kind of strength, I suppose, something much more difficult to write in fiction because it's not as overt and external as traditionally masculine methods of showing strength, which are almost always very external. And also as a side note, actually, when one of femininity's great strengths is its nurturing qualities, I'm a counsellor. Of course, I value that trait very highly. That is very much about helping others and yourself to become the best possible people, and doing that for anybody in whatever situations, be it parent or friend or teacher or whatever, is an incredible skill that I admire 1,000 times more than the ability to beat people up, you know? And generally as well, I think writers also commonly mistake aggression for strength in their characters, which, except from a very few specific examples, it almost never is. You know, people should live however the hell they want to live, basically, as long as they're not doing harm. Who are we to know the best thing for a certain individual when everybody is so different to everybody else? Why is there any message about a set way women or men should behave? Because isn't that where we come into trouble? When men are told they have to be these tough, slightly brutish figures, you get kids growing up trapped into that expectation and suppressing all emotion in often unhealthy ways as a result. Or telling women to stick to baking and pretty things, suppressing all the sides of a person that needs to rage and grapple with the world and needs to have some agency of their own, among other things. And so in the same way, on the flip side, telling men they can't be macho, that wouldn't be a great message. It's part of the distinction I was trying to make in my Ted Lasso video about masculinity. There is nothing wrong with the character of Roy Kent being a very macho, tough, sweary man. He doesn't have to be one, but it's fine to be, because he's also a very thoughtful, considerate, secure, mature person at the same time, who doesn't use aggression to dominate others. Being macho has some great strengths, not that I'm particularly macho at all, but it's not always as toxic as people label it. It does have good strengths, but if you try to squeeze your entire being just into a macho image, however, or what you define as a macho image, that would be very bad. A lot of horrible weaknesses will start to appear. You'll end up feeling horrendously trapped or end up what people tend to call toxic. In that sense, why the hell would it be a good idea to start telling women they need to be exactly like the sort of men that we're only just starting to recognise as unhealthy? Although I'm not sure a lot of fiction has caught up with the idea of that as unhealthy. That's why Ted Lasso was such a breath of fresh air, to see healthy masculinity done in the way it was there. But I think the problem is then twofold, really. One is that we might not be giving people the best idea of what to aspire to. And two, actually threefold, because what we're told to aspire to is something that bears very little relation to most of our daily lives. You know, like, in what day-to-day situations should I be cracking terrible one-liners during traumatic situations like a superhero, or picking fights or whatever? I think the idea of superheroes was that we get to see someone human grappling with the very human struggles we do, but on a much grander, more epic scale. Not to see someone apparently surpassing all ordinary humanity with unparalleled amounts of strength and often wit and the effortless skill to find their way out of any dilemma without any need for anyone's support. But, threefold. The third point was role models as a whole. It's very much a buzzword, I think, at the moment, empowering role models. People always talk about how they're needed, and they are, I think. I'm not going to argue otherwise. I'm just going to point out that they also come with a possible downside, which is what might be intended as something for us to aspire to may actually be something that puts pressure on us. There's a very thin line between saying women can be tough and saying women have to be tough. But then where does that leave women who don't feel tough in that kind of way? I think role models only work when our society has the palette to celebrate a vast array of different role models bearing different kinds of strengths, not just one or two. And taking it even further, role models are something to aspire to when they do feel human, when they do appear to struggle with the same things we do, only they overcome it. That gives us way more hope than someone who is just so perfect they don't struggle at all. That again, I think, adds more pressure than real inspiration. I'll get back to masculinity and femininity though. I tend to think each person is a collection of a lot of different, often contradictory aspects to their personality which call for different things in different situations or in different moods. People are messy, I guess. They aren't just wholly masculine or wholly feminine. Not that those two things are some rigid, clearly defined, concrete thing. Obviously they're not. That's kind of my point. Everybody shows a bit of both, which means unless we prize both traditionally masculine and feminine traits, then we're promoting an idea of people suffocating themselves down into just one of those boxes, and that would be so restricting as to barely breathe, I think. So yeah, I tend to think it's best when all people can show traits of both what is typically femininity and masculinity in given situations that require them. Do they have to show those traits in the same way? No, you can show feminine traits in a masculine way, or masculine traits in a feminine way, or really in just whatever way you are as a person. I think we can all be a bit too eager to tell others how to live, which is natural to an extent, I guess. It's partly our way of trying to grapple with answers and to make a positive difference. There's just a danger there. A world too caught up telling everybody how they should be without stopping to consider what's best for the individual. Remembering, of course, that each individual is very different. Quite a niche example, but I found from time to time when I have counselled children with certain difficulties, there are times when they do have this big, great, very positive support network around them, always thinking hard about how to support them and coming up with plans about what's best for them, putting things in place. But there have been times where they're failing to ask the kid what they feel about these plans and ideas. What does the kid think is best for themselves? Surely they should have a say. Which I find tends to be the wonderful thing about working as a counsellor. I don't have to tell anyone how to be or what they should or shouldn't do. I instead just listen and ask questions and try to understand a given person's situation as deeply as possible. Empathise with their perspective and then help them define what's best for them. They're in the driving seat, I'm in the passenger seat. They find the answers. I just try and help them to do so. Because ultimately what one person needs to grow isn't the same for somebody else. You can't know what they need until you actually listen to them. So with that in mind, I'm just going to throw in a load of quotes from Galatea's video now, sharing some very eloquent personal feeling and experiences. It feels weird to be trying to expand on a specific point her video made me think about without actually quoting it, so here's all this.
And the amount of women who say they've spent years feeling guilty about the fact they're naturally feminine, like it makes them weak or pathetic or unworthy, it's a lot of them. But the worst thing is when I get messages or comments from teenage girls saying the same thing, and that makes me angry enough to want to cry. Teenage girls get such a hard time from everyone. Everyone's always accusing them of being annoying. Their bodies are changing, and not just changing, but changing in ways that bring them intense physical pain. Hormones are flying all over the place. They're wondering if they're too fat or too skinny, or if they can ever be beautiful. They're likely hating their bodies. Suddenly grown men are looking at them, but they still feel like children, so they don't know what to do, which is horrifying. And everything is painful and terrifying and stressful. Of course they're annoying. Give them a break. What do you expect? So I think a certain degree of feeling really uncomfortable with femininity as a young girl is normal. But then the problem is young girls don't have any sort of guidance, so they don't necessarily know that it is normal and just end up feeling powerless or screwed up. For me, being a teenage girl felt like being adrift out at sea with no anchor. Wanting to be feminine because I knew that's how I was, but also being terrified of what that meant. Not that I never wore nice things, I did, and I sort of enjoyed it and wanted to be attractive, but I also never felt comfortable because I was not entirely comfortable with the fact I was female. I did not like it. It felt scary. More than scary, actually. It's a feeling I can't describe. Almost a slightly sickening feeling of disgust. I wanted to crawl out of my own skin and be free of it. Because there must be something fundamentally wrong with me. That's how it felt. Like there'd been a mistake somewhere between childhood and that point, and suddenly my body didn't feel like mine anymore. So I hear this a fair bit online of men saying young women just get handed all of this social power without having to do anything or prove yourself, that men will just be interested in you anyway. And I know a few of them can be a bit resentful about that, which I get, it's understandable, but they're only seeing one side of it. From the perspective of a teenage girl, it doesn't really feel like you have all this power. It doesn't feel like it's all just plain sailing. Sometimes it can, sure, of course, but a lot of the time it's just confusing. It's like if, out of nowhere, you were suddenly handed a really sharp and dangerous sword you didn't ask for, can't get rid of, and don't know how to use. Is that power? It can be, but just as easily you could end up hurting yourself or others because you've got no idea what to do with it, and it might take you a long time to figure out how to wield it properly, and maybe it could make you a target as much as it could make you powerful. As a teenage girl, you suddenly feel very vulnerable. If you feel vulnerable, what you want then is to feel powerful so you can protect yourself. And if you're never hearing how there is strength in femininity, if the only representations of strength you see are masculine ideals, then either you might develop a victimhood mentality and always feel like prey, Or maybe you're going to push femininity away so that you can become powerful, to make yourself safe, to protect yourself from how vulnerable you are. And if you can't achieve those masculine ideals of strength because it does not come naturally to you, then you'll feel even more afraid and powerless and unsafe, and probably hate yourself for being weak and actually end up totally disempowered, and all in the name of feminism.
Sorry for dumping quite a lot in one big section there. It's just very articulate, important feelings being expressed. Will every woman relate to all of that? How the hell should I know? Probably not. Everybody's different, but there are quite likely a lot of people who do. And all I can do is try to listen and understand a perspective beyond my own. I think an issue is that people get too caught up in media trying to spread a positive message. They want to do good, of course they do. We all really want to make some kind of difference, but the problem is life is very confused and it's hard to know how to make a difference. It's scary, so sometimes people restrict themselves down to a simple answer. Women need more strong, almost masculine female figures in fiction that will empower them. And they carry that single, simplified answer forwards like a crusade because to fret that maybe this message doesn't fit for everybody, maybe we need others, sometimes contradictory messages too, maybe even just having a fictional character who represents something without actually being a deep and fleshed out character isn't enough. You know, like, all of that stuff is troubling to think on and full of doubts and uncertainty when all we want to do is just something good, particularly if we're very keen on the gratification. So in that sense, maybe we do stick to the simple answer we've grasped that and forget to listen to people's experiences beyond that. Sometimes some people even go one step further and not just forget to listen, but attack people's experience that differ with their simplified answer. Really, I think it is kind of near impossible to not be spreading some sort of message when we do express stuff, but I do think things tend to go much better when we're not consciously trying to spread the right message so much as just expressing our personal feelings, not expecting them to apply to everyone, or even anyone, and not expecting them to be the truth. Sincere emotion, I think, is what people resonate with most. Even if you might disagree with the ideas, you can still resonate and empathise with the experience. So that's my thinking. We're too busy trying to tell people how they should be all the time, forgetting people have to be however the hell they find is best for them. If we want to help them to do so, that has to start with listening on an individual basis, sharing our feelings, thinking about those feelings, trying to encourage others to share and think about theirs. It would be nice if someone could just tell us how to be, but it's impossible. We have to figure out what suits for us, which is scary and difficult, but normal. And I think that's okay. If Hollywood wants to create empowering female characters, that surely has to start with a character that, to some extent, reflects a lot of those feelings and experiences. A character that says, these are some of the things certain people can struggle with, this is me struggling through them in my example. And then you get other characters that reflect other feelings and other experiences that people can sometimes have, and as an audience you find ones that resonate for you growing up. That seems a better system in my eyes than just chuck out a character that says, look how strong and brilliant I am, be like me. Maybe that's fine in certain situations, but every character to be like that in every story, how does that help anyone, you know? Surely that just creates a lot of pressure, like when people on Instagram post photos of amazing places they've been able to afford to visit and say, if you work hard every day like I do, you could afford to go here too. And it makes you think, damn, have I not worked hard enough then? Should I now be feeling guilty for not being as rich as them? Is that inspiration? I reckon I've said this before, but I think the most inspiring thing is always sincerity. I think someone can take away far more from Galadriel there just openly expressing how she felt it was to be a teenage girl than anyone can take away from Galadriel wearing armour. Not to fire shots against the new Lord of the Rings series, I haven't looked up anything about it at all, really. I was never going to, because I was never going to watch it anyway. Fuck paying for Amazon Prime. I hope there's something to take away from all this. Again, this is a video where I haven't exactly gotten to the bottom of what I'm trying to say. Hopefully you can expand in the comments or tell me where I've gone astray and got this wrong. But otherwise, like the video if you did like it, subscribe if you want something more. Proper in-depth analysis videos are on their way. Support me on Patreon if you want to help keep this channel going, but otherwise, hopefully see you next time.
And as ever, a special thank you goes to Janice McMahon, Luke Hoare, Chichu Kaber, Michael Gallagher, InSquares, Dustin Paulson, Brian Herring, Samara Salsi, Sharikov2814, Joshua C. Follier, Chad Bramwell, and Incomplete Sentience. Thank you.